From the MMA, we're in Newcastle just before Cage Warriors 62, and we've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to be joined by a man whose name is now synonymous with Cage Warriors, and that's Graham Boylan. Thank you so much. We know how busy you must be. I did some research because I get yelled at when I don't, but one thing I couldn't find out was very much about Graham Boylan. I can find out about your cage. Where did the love affair with MMA start for you?
That's a loaded question. I lived in Australia in 1999, 2000. I lived with two Canadian boys. They were MMA fanatics, into the UFC. I was very much into professional boxing at the time. I was training with a bunch of pro boxers in Sydney. We were sparring every day, training every day, and they kept showing me these fights in the UFC at that time. I don't even know, but we're probably talking UFC in the late 30s.
Yeah.
And fast forward was 2 years later, after I left Australia, there was a big reunion between all of us who hung out in Oz in Las Vegas, and the reunion was around UFC 48. I think it was 48. It was called Redemption. It was Shamrock and Ortiz.
Yep.
I think we're talking 2002. We all met in Vegas. I saw my first UFC and fell in love with the sport. And from then on, I've been involved in those boys sending me tapes, watching. I've been flying back and forth, and that's what the love relationship began.
It seems it's very rare that somebody with a professional boxing background embraces MMA quickly. It seems that there's always a lot, when the UFC came to London in UFC 30, and you had Frank Warren and all of these promoters saying these guys aren't athletes. Did you ever have that sort of that prejudice, and did you have to overcome it, or were you more open-minded than that?
Very open-minded guy, man. I understood the training behind an athlete who decides to be a fighter. So I've been a strength and conditioning coach for 10 years, and to watch the training that a professional boxer does, and then to back in 2002, 2003, get involved with some guys who were fighting MMA and watch the training they were doing. What they were doing was kind of a little bit dated, and being open-minded and moving forward with the strength and conditioning side of how that industry was moving, I thought these guys need to do a little bit more educated training than the training that they were doing. So boxing, MMA didn't really bother me. The training they were doing did.
Right.
And that's when I converted over. I started working with guys in the game. I started working with Mark Fury, who was working with Matt Hughes at the time, and Robbie Lawler, and Fury became a very long-term friend of mine and kind of converted me straight into MMA, basically. Yeah.
Between 2003 and 2010, how did you stay involved in MMA, or how did sort of the progression to where you are now take shape, or did you have no clue that at 2010 Cage Warriors would be where you're at?
That's a fucking loaded question.
I'm sorry, I'm asking.
No, it's good. It's good. You're challenging my head. It was back then. It was more of a training side for me. I had no intention of getting involved in promotions. I had no intention of getting involved in running these shows. There was a big business opportunity and meetings happened with the type of training that I was doing and the gyms that I was running, and it came to me to, would you be interested in doing this? And I said no, and it actually took the board of Cage Warriors close to 8 months to convince me to take this job. I said no for 8 months, and then we came to an agreement where they were willing to open their minds up to the way I was thinking and why I would get involved, and that's where we ended up today.
We'll obviously get on to that decision in 2010, but again, just because I want to get to know a little bit more about you, abiding MMA memories before Cage Warriors? For example, Cage Warriors has been around a long, long time. It's 2001, 2000, maybe even before then. So it had a past. Did you know the brand of Cage Warriors?
Yes. I was fully aware of the brand. I was fully aware of the history. The board came to me and said, "This is what we're doing. This is what we think. What are your thoughts? Do you know the brand?" And I said, "Yeah, we know the brand." I wasn't in agreement with the way they were thinking, what they wanted to do. It took a while to digest their plans and what I wanted to do with their plans. When we came to an agreement, we then signed everything up and moved forward. Yeah.
This is going to seem awfully sycophantic, I suppose. But, just having spent 3-4 minutes talking with you, you can see that you like to think things through, that you're articulate, that you obviously know your own mind. What was it about the challenge of taking over in 2010 that you found most exciting and most appealing?
The brand was dead. It was a brand with history. It was a brand that could have done so much more with the right team. Not to take anything away from the team who had built the brand or who had made Cage Warriors what it was, but the sport was growing, and that had so much history. It could be so much bigger. And I looked at it and thought, this is a nice challenge. It's got a good backbone. It's got a spine, and with that spine, we can grow and develop that. So it was more of a challenge to me than anything else. Yeah.
Had you, with your boxing past, had you promoted before? Was that kind of your business? What you were known for, or because your name is synonymous with Cage Warriors now. I mean, and that's only in 3 short years. That's not it's not a huge amount of time, really. Yeah. What was your experience, sort of, in that side of things before hitting up Cage Warriors?
We ran some boxing events, nothing major. My entire background is strength conditioning and boxing. Did nothing in the MMA scene, did nothing in the boxing scene on a promotion basis. So, but been to a show or an event every weekend for 6-7 years. So, been backstage, been involved. We knew the ins and outs of running events, but we never actually did them. So, going into Cage Warriors would be a case of, let's just do 1 or 2 shows. Let's just slowly build in and see how it goes. And here we are later.
What was the biggest learning curve for those first couple of events that you took over there? What was the thing that you had to get your head around that perhaps you hadn't considered? Or was there not? Do you game plan everything out and look at every contingency?
The learning curve was more a case of you need a consistency in a team. If you got a different team and you've got a different group of people every time you do the event, you're then open to mistakes and you're then open to problems that occur. If you have the same team every event, we put a pretty solid team together now, but if you're the same team every event, then your product and your event becomes consistent because the team knows where they need to be, they know what they got to do, and there's no mess ups basically. So the learning curve for me at the start was get a solid team.
You did an interview a little while back with, I won't mention, I'm not going to name a competitor, but you did an interview and you talked about, the team that you had around, the team that you've developed and got around you. You've said they're important, but someone like Ian Dean, for example, what does Ian bring to the table that perhaps someone else wouldn't?
Okay, so Ian's my, I call him Wikidenia. He's my knowledge, so I don't need to use Google or Wikimedia, or Ian's my Wikimedia. So we would look at a card. I would say, right, this is the left side of the card. Let's get 3 options for every fighter on that card. And he would, in the space of 24 hours, spit out 3 fighters for every fighter I've put on the left side of that card. We would then sit down and argue. We argue a lot. Yeah. We would sit down and argue about why, who, what fight. And to be fair to him, the guy is a MMA legend. The guy, he could tell me who won what fight in whatever date, in whatever city, at whatever time, how they won, how the fight went, just by me mentioning their name. And that's good for me, because then I can make decisions when I've got a guy like that sitting next to me, can go blah 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 blah, and I can go, okay, so I challenge him and would question why he would give these three guys for this one guy. So we'd sit down, we'd argue. Sometimes he wants to kill me, sometimes I want to punch him in the face, but by the end of the day we get a good fight card together.
Obviously Ian Dean's known as the matchmaker, but you've got other members of this team around you. Paul Dollery's your press officer, but are there perhaps some unsung heroes that, and I will always ask at the end if there's anyone you want to shout out, but are there some unsung heroes that people need to know about behind the scenes of Cage Warriors?
Yeah, Paul is a pretty unsung hero. Paul does a lot for myself and Ian. He doesn't get spoken about a lot, and he doesn't get the exposure or credit that a person in his position would deserve, purely because he takes so much shit off my back and Ian's back and puts it into words that are acceptable to the public. The words that would come out of my mouth versus the words that Paul would type are two different stories. Yeah. So he's a pretty unsung hero in all this. Ian gets so much credit for putting the fights together. I'd probably get credit for running the show, but nobody speaks about the press guys or the production team.
Yeah.
The production team are, right now we're sitting here, they've been in the arena for the past 24 hours and nobody ever talks about them. Because they don't see it. They see the fights, they see the exposure, they see what goes on. They don't see the 60 people every show, every city, every country we go to that I fly in, that are working their ass off 24/7 at the arena, putting the show together. So yeah, my production team.
I'm going to ask this question because we spoke to Ian about it, and we were at the last UFC European event, and of course they were talking about a European matchmaker, and immediately people in the rows were turning around and they talked about Ian's name. Does that bother you at all, or do you think that that's credit well deserved? Or would you ever stop somebody from making that step to the UFC if that's what they wanted, or do you not even? That's not even something that you consider. Because I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Because you are, your promotion does create UFC fighters.
Yeah, we've given the UFC, I think, 14 fighters in the past 18 months.
Yeah.
The honest answer to that is, if somebody wants to move on to bigger and brighter and better things and move on to greener pasture, then that's how life works. Yeah. It's development. If anybody comes after anybody on my team, which the UFC have done, there's a lot of my guys that are now working for the UFC, then all credit to them. All credit to them.
So the first few events under sort of your leadership happened in 2010. What was the short-term plan, perhaps a 12-month plan at that point, and what was the longer-term plan, and how close are you to realizing that at the moment?
The short-term plan for Cage Warriors was to just maybe have a few shows, get the brand back, get people talking about the brand. I planned four shows over 12 months. We did that. We actually did 6, and we hit. I put it through when I got handed 3 cardboard boxes, by the way. Yeah. They handed me 3 cardboard boxes and Ian Dean. And with those 3 cardboard boxes, I took them home, opened them up. 2 of them I put in the bin, and one of them, there was a few hard drives and some CDs of photos and from the history of the show. I then spent probably a week isolated and put a 3-year plan together for the brand, for the promotion, and what we're going to do. The plans we put in place for the 3 years, we hit the 3rd year plan halfway through the 2nd year. So from then, everything had to be rethought, replanned, and move forward. Right now, we're in this fast forward in these 3 years. We're live in 150 million homes around the world. We're live on MMA Junkie, and the MMA Junkie side of what we did is a big thing for the industry and for the sport and for UK MMA, because they got such a big fan base on that side in the US that hits our US market, and to partner up with them was a really big deal for the stream, for the sport, and for Cage Warriors in itself. To get Ian Dean matchmaking full time was a dream come true for him. So to move all these little obstacles together and make Cage Warriors what it is today was a pretty big challenge at the time. But now you look back on it and you think, we got to move this forward. We got to go there.
And that, of course, leads to the next. Obviously, there are certain things that you will be happy to discuss and certain things you won't. But what is the next short-term plan? What is the next sort of 12 to 18 months? And what's the next 36 to 48 months? Where do you see Cage Warriors going? Or where do you want it to go?
That's a good question, man. I signed to be in this game for 3 years as a professional. My 3 years is done. It's finished. I'm at the moment deciding whether I want to stay in MMA. So this is probably an exclusive for you and for your interview, but
yes, about time I got one from somebody.
Over the next 2 or 3 months, I'll be deciding whether I'm going to stay in the sport or not.
Okay. Is that? I'm going to ask the question. Is that, are there personal reasons, or are there new ambitions? Are there new challenges that you want to put in, or have you done what you set out to do?
I've done what I set out to do, and I'm a guy that needs challenges to wake up. The challenge I was set with Cage Warriors, I've completed. I've taken a dormant, on-the-shelf promotion and probably made it the biggest show in Europe, the biggest show outside the US. There's 160 something rostered fighters on the promotion now. It's live on TV. How far can I take it? I don't know. We're in conversations at the moment. Whether I'll stay in MMA, whether I'll stay in the sport, I don't know. We'll see, but I'm a gym guy. I'm a gym rat.
Yeah.
I like being in the gym. I like getting punched in the face. I like training with the guys.
Yeah.
I like punching them in the face. Being the CEO of Cage Warriors means I'm on a different plane, a different country, a different city every week, and that takes its toll.
Yeah.
It takes its toll, and that's not the. That was a challenge for me 3 years ago. 3 years is done. I don't know how long I'm going to stay in the sport or as a CEO of Cage Warriors, but we're talking, and I'll do what's right for the brand, and I'll do what's right for my team if I do decide to step out. Yeah.
You talked about the fact that you arguably the biggest promotion in Europe, certainly the biggest promotion outside of the United States. This is an awkward question, so I'm going to sit back when I ask it. But when you started, Cage Warriors went on a big signing spree. They started signing lots and lots of fighters to sort of 4 or 5 fight contracts, and there was rumblings in sort of UK media that this might not necessarily be good for the sport. Is there place for Cage Warriors, Bama, and other within the UK, or is Cage Warriors the one and all?
The sport needs direction, okay, and the fighters need direction. The fighters need a career, and the problem that I saw with MMA in general was you had these guys training 4 to 5 hours a day, and there was no direction for them. Signing these guys and giving them a contract was giving them a path, and it was progressing their career, because they didn't go from being a guy training in the gym for 4 hours a day, waiting to see if a fight happened or waiting to see if there was an organization going to call them or chasing a fight. They went from that to being an athlete. And maybe in time, 5-6 years from now, people will look back and they'll think, holy shit, man, these guys did something with these guys and changed things around. I honestly believe that Cage Warriors over the past 3 years has pushed MMA up. You know, Bama, UCMA, OMAC. Yeah. They're all great promotions, and I would love for these promotions to keep pushing and doing what they're doing, because that progresses the sport. Yeah. This is not a case of Cage Warriors is the one and this is the only. It's a case of the sport, man. And if a lot of promotions do things in the right way and progress the athletes, then what does that do for MMA, man? It just pushes it up. Yeah. It gives it more exposure. The guys have got more choice. They've got a career. They can actually decide, I want to be a fighter. Fine, be a fighter. You've got a path now. You've got a contract. You've got a wage. You know you're going to earn this month. You know you're going to earn next month. You know you've got something to do. It's not a case of you're training for nothing. Yeah. And that's what the sport needed. And when we came in, I thought, right, let's start treating these guys the same way that professional athletes get treated in any other sport. You know, this is not just a community hall run sport or promotion. Let's give the guys a career, man. And we started putting contracts in and signing them.
Would there ever be a time that there might be crossover between your promotion and any of the other sort of or is that something that would never happen?
I don't believe in crossover promotions. I don't believe in core promotions. It just mixes things up, man. You know, it's a case of its individuality as regards the promotion goes. So every promotion has got its niche, has got its following. Some people will think this promotion is for the sport, this promotion is for showbiz, this promotion is for whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as it's run okay and the athletes are protected and they've got a career, it doesn't matter what they're doing.
Again, a few months ago, Cage Warriors started signing a lot of women MMA athletes, female athletes to the promotion. You did an open Twitter conversation, and one of the questions I asked you was, how far do you intend to take the women's division? And you said all the way, titles and all. Is that still part of the short-term Cage Warriors plan, to develop weight classes and titles for women's MMA?
Within the next 12 months, I'm hopefully going to finish. I've set the plans in place for the next 2 years already. Whether I stay with Cage Warriors or whether I finish with Cage Warriors, the plans are in place. Those plans will be followed. And by the end of 2014, there will be an all-women, female Cage Warriors event.
How many weight classes are we looking at for the women within that period?
It's a small. We've looked at this in depth, and it's not a huge. Deep divisions that you can put on. So we're looking at nothing above 145 at the moment. 145 down, maybe 3-4 divisions. We will load that up. We're going to do 2, maybe 3 events. 2-3 fights per event. And towards the end of 2014, I've written in that there will be an all-female show.
What do you think women's MMA? It started to take off a lot. In the last sort of 12 to 18 months. You've got British and Scottish fighters like Joe Calderwood, and then you've got the fine Amanda Kelly and the fine women that you've signed up. What do you think the appeal of women's MMA is, and do you think it'll ever get over that sort of prejudiced hump that it's girls fighting? Do you think that the MMA market in the UK is ready for that yet?
I don't think the MMA market in the UK is ready for anything, to be totally honest. Anything that makes sense doesn't make sense to the industry, As regards female MMA, it's no different to male MMA. These girls train the same hours, they go through the same shit. They deserve the exposure that they're getting. And the reason we actually went and decided to put on a full-on, let's go after all these girls and give them the exposure that they need, was because they weren't getting that. And it was, I looked at it in depth and I thought, you know what, there's like 40 girls, 50 girls in Europe that are worth talking to. Where are they fighting? Why are they not on TV? Why don't I hear about them? And why are all the guys getting all the limelight? These girls are training as much as these guys. Let's go after them. Let's talk about them. We sat down for maybe a whole week. We sat around the table in the office. Me, Ian, Paul, and we threw names on the table. We threw fights on the table. And I just said, at the end of the week, I said, you know what? Let's just do it, man. Cage Warriors had maybe 1, 2 female fights every other event. Let's just give these girls a division, man. Let's give them the exposure that they need, and here we are. And by the end of 2014, there will be an all-female event.
I mean, well, you answered the question that I'm going to ask, sort of, but, you know, should you decide that enough's enough, it's time to step back, do you worry at all that perhaps something like that might get put on the back burner, or are you confident that they will follow through with your vision, despite the fact you're not there?
I've put the systems in place, the company's built. It's not about me, it's about the brand, and the brand is done, the promotion is done, the fighters are there. If anything is about a person in a company or a person that's running a promotion, then it's not about the promotion, really, is it? I might as well rename Cage Warriors Graham Boylan MMA, you know? It's about Cage Warriors, it's about the brand, and that's the name. Who's running it can make a difference, cannot make a difference, but Cage Warriors will go on to do everything it needs to do and everything that it's perceived to be, no matter who's driving the car.
I'm going to challenge that, because obviously you took over when, and I mean, let's look at the list of some of the past fighters that have appeared at Cage Warriors. You know, your Dan Hardys, your Michael Bispings, your, you know, the who's who of UK MMA in terms of the rankings now at the UFC. But the brand still went into a decline and a recession. You know, it kind of petered out or flatlined. Does it not worry you at all that perhaps without you at the helm at the moment that might happen again?
I'll put somebody pretty good in place if I'm going to step back.
Well,
okay. I've put 3 years into this, and if I'm going to walk away from it, I'll put somebody in place that can drive that car. You know, it's like I say to people on a regular basis, a company or a team is very similar to Formula One. There's a driver. But that driver is nothing or no one without the car or the team that makes that car and that team work. You can get another driver, but the team is solid. And once the team is solid, you can go shopping for a driver. I'm just a driver, man. And anyone can come in and step over or step into that driver's seat because the team is there and they know what they're doing. All the driver's got to do is guide them.
Is your relationship with Cage Warriors such now, though, that if they picked up the phone and asked for some advice, you'd never turn? It doesn't seem to me you'd ever turn your back on them.
No.
Would you always be available?
Of course. I've given this 3 years of my life, 24/7. Giving something and creating a baby like this from nothing, where you've given your life to a brand or a product 24/7, you're always going to have a love for it. You're always going to have a love, but there comes a time when that love has got to be handed over to somebody else, and somebody else has got to step into that seat and drive that car, because how long can you give your love to something without you getting stale?
Yeah.
And if you bring a fresh mind in and let somebody else take over and let them move on, then, you know, maybe it'll go to better and bigger things. And I can sit back as a fan and go, hey, look at this, man. This has done things that I didn't think of, or I didn't think it would do, and that's what fresh minds do in fresh businesses.
This might be a tough question, because, you know, your mind is obviously not made up yet, but what would be your abiding Cage Warrior memory? What would be the one moment that stays with you until you're gone, until you're no more? What would be your proudest moment with Cage Warriors?
Proudest moment with Cage Warriors? Shit, man, you've done me there. How will I even contemplate on trying to pick a moment over the past 3 years? If you give me a little bit more time on that question, I could probably sit back and think about that.
I tell you what, you can tweet me that answer.
I'll tweet you that answer, yeah.
Graham, again, we appreciate your time. You know how busy you must be today, seeing as it's fight day, another fantastic event here in Newcastle. Before we let you go, I always ask the fighters this, so I'm going to ask you. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to? Anybody you'd like to say thank you to? The camera's yours.
Okay. James Quigley. He's the production manager that I put in place at Cage Warriors 3 years ago. We fly to probably a different city, a different country every month, and I know when I arrive at that arena, I don't need to ask anything about the show. He's got everything in place, everything's ready to go, cage, lights, you name it. We've been to Chechnya where We've had to hook up generators all around the building to cover power. We've had to switch generators to cover aircon. The guy is amazing, and I'd like to say thank you to James, because without him, maybe Cage Warriors wouldn't be what it was, what it is now, because he works his ass off. And he's been in that arena in Newcastle right now for the past 24 hours, whipping, pushing, getting everything ready so that when I arrive tomorrow on my team, today, everything's good to go. So I'd like to say thank you, James. Thank you, Better. You're a good guy, and you've done yourself proud looking after Cage Warriors, and you've been a big help to the team.
Graham, thank you so much. If there's anyone else, feel free. I can sit here for 10 minutes. If you've got, I bet you've got a list.
We're good. We're good.
Wonderful. Graham, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to sit and chat with you, and best of luck with the show tonight. I know it'll be fine. Thank you. Thank you.